Well, our chair, Mary Ellen Brett, was not able to be here today, so she asked if I would just kind of move things along in her absence. This just kind of, excuse me, came up suddenly. Excuse me. So welcome to the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee meeting, CEDS. It is January 17th, and this meeting is being recorded. The first item on the agenda is to read the accessibility statement, and I'll read that. Old Colony Planning Council, including the CEDS Committee, assures that no person shall be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be otherwise discriminated against under any of its programs and activities. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities and those with limited English proficiency. Accessibility accommodations and language services will be provided free of charge upon request as available. Our full policies are available at www.ocpcrpa.org. Any person who feels their protections have been violated may file a written complaint within 180 days to Mary Waldron at mwaldron@ocpcrpa.org or Old Colony Planning Council, 70 School Street, Brockton, Mass. 02301. So we do have a roll call, and I'll just run through that. Hold on one second. We have somebody else to enter. So John Murray, I think I saw you. John here?
He can't make it, Dottie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jason,
Yep.
got you. Chris Cooney, I don't see. Pam McCarthy is here. Rob May, not here. Jay, you taking his place?
I am here, John, as in his stead.
John. Okay. Stephanie Danielson is not here yet. Jay Patikos, I think I
Here.
saw you. Yep. Jennifer Burke is happily moved out of state to warmer and sunnier places, and she is being replaced by Robert Ruley. So I think I saw Robert. Yep, there you are. Welcome today.
Thank you.
And Lee Filson is, she's not going to be here today, and she may be stepping back for a little bit. So Michael Lambert or anyone at bat. We have Joe Meck is here.
Hello.
And Deborah Roberts is not here. Stephen Cole here. Jack Riley, not here. Kyle Haas, I don't see, not here. Okay, and let me just, we have Mary Ellen. Laura Buckley is here, but did not want to be promoted as a panelist. Tricia White, Cindy Pendergast, and Nicole Salvo, let me add. Excellent. So if I miss anybody, let me know. The first thing that we have next is the review and approval of the minutes from September 13th. If everybody's had a chance to take a look at those and somebody would like to make a motion to approve in a second.
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, Pam. And the second?
I second.
Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, unanimous. All right, next up, we have a new staff person, director. We have Dawn Sullivan. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction and then Dawn can talk for a minute. Dawn Sullivan recently joined OCPC as the Director of Economic Resiliency and Housing Equity. He was formerly the Director of Community and Economic Development for Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District, also known as SERPED. Dawn has 37 years of professional experience in planning, community and economic development, including downtown revitalization, commercial and industrial development, brownfields, corridor redevelopment feasibility studies, infrastructure development, grant writing, project development, management, and administration. So welcome, Dawn. If you want to just tell people a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks, Dottie. Had a long day today thus far with the technology issues going on since last Thursday and into today. So it's been sort of a long day already, but just happy to be here and looking forward to work with you folks, trying to develop some projects and bring some additional money into the district. We're really heavily focused on really project development and bringing funding into not only to OCPC, but to district communities, specifically EDA money. So again, just happy to be here and looking forward to working with all you folks and trying to just make the district a better place to live. So
Aboard.
thank you.
Excellent. All right, we are trying to get through some of these pretty quickly because we have an amazing guest speaker today. Stephen Cole is going to tell us all about the great things that he's doing down in Plymouth. The first thing that we wanted to talk about is we've got 16 members, and I think our bylaws call for 19, but we had previous discussions about making sure that we were filling the gaps, not only in geography, but in sector, and we're trying to round that out a little bit. So there was talk about increasing the membership to either 23 or 25. And then also talking about the quorum. Sometimes it's hard to get a quorum, and one of the risks of making a membership bigger is the challenge it is to have a quorum. But what we can do is we can say that the quorum must have a minimum of 5 members to achieve a quorum, so that we could still move on and have business. And we were going to recommend that the membership here voted to either approve 23 or 25, and then the minimum members of 5 for a quorum. Does anybody have any comments or ideas or thoughts about that? No comments. Anybody want to make a motion to well, the first motion would be to amend the bylaws to allow for more members, and then that would be either 23 or 25 and the quorum.
I make a motion to amend the bylaws to increase the membership to 25.
Okay.
Second,
And a second. Who was the second?
Val.
Val. Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, so the motion passes. Thank you. The next thing that we have in this is the nominations accepted for the possible vote for co-chair. So Mary Ellen Brett is still willing to serve as a co-chair. I think it's probably a great idea because she has some of the experience to carry over, and that would leave one more seat open. Rob May had said that he would throw his hat in the ring, and so did Kyle Haas. So neither of them are here today. Maybe what if it might make sense to just table this until the next one, unless somebody here wants to make a motion.
No,
You think we should table it?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's table that one till next time. And we also were looking for nominations accepted for possible new members. And we had invited Cindy Pendergrass. She works with NeighborWorks Housing Solutions, and Cindy represents the housing aspect of economic development. Tricia White also works for NeighborWorks Housing Solutions, but in an economic development role. Laura Buckley is with South Shore Workforce Development. She has a lot of experience down in the South Shore area, but particularly with data and information. Melissa Ferretti, who's not here today, is the chair lady / president of the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe. She has been she's on a lot of different boards and committees. We're really trying to get her to join, but she's got limited time. So we're still trying to catch up with her. And then Mary Ellen DeFrayis, who's also here today, representing GATRA. So having BAT and GATRA represent transportation. So with Cindy, Tricia, Laura, and Mary Ellen, if somebody would like to make a motion to give them membership to the CEDS,
I make a motion.
and if we could get a second,
I second the motion.
and Pam, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Well, congratulations and welcome Cindy, Tricia, Laura, and Mary Ellen. Welcome back, Mary Ellen, I should say.
Thank you. Phew, nobody opposed. Okay.
You never know, it happens. I'm used to those.
We'll give
So
it
an
time. Give it time.
An update on the CEDS for co-hosted webinars. We had talked about that. The two webinars that people were really interested in was one on arts, culture, tourism, and how that connects to economic development. And the other one was how to be successful with writing federal grants. So we just mapped out the 4 meetings for our CEDS regular meetings for a year. And so we have, I think I included those in the calendar invite, which is today, January, then April, July, and October. But we also wanted to include 2 webinars. So we wanted to do one in February and one in April. The one in February, we're holding the date on that for February 21st. And Dawn and I are going to try to coordinate with the chair, which whether we're going to be able to do the arts and culture first, or whether we're going to do the federal, how to win federal awards first. So we will give people an update on that and an invitation on that. So stay tuned. We're kind of throwing a lot at Dawn right when he comes in, but want to make sure that he is very involved in that. The next is project updates for economic development data tools that we, OCPC got an award for a data dashboard and an economic development self-assessment. We have been working on that since August, really trying to develop the data sets that we want to include on that data dashboard. We're making really great progress with that. And what our intention is to get a mock-up up on the website and then give it to this group and to other stakeholders to take a look at it from user experience, and also, are these the data sets that all our stakeholders want? Once we get the framework of that up and on the website, we'll be able to make adjustments and change and adds based on the focus groups that we deal with. So digging into all of the data in our region has been really interesting. It's kind of hard. We're trying to compile it all, but I want to read it all too, because it's got some just fascinating data about the work that we do. And I think that everybody will be really excited about that. And then for the economic development assessment tool, I've got a framework of the questions that are in the questionnaire, and we're internally going to take a look at that, see what to edit and add, and then we'll send that out to people to take a look at as well, with a little scenario of how to use, where we're going to go with that. Dawn is going to talk about the next ones, an EDA regional water study application that's submitted, and then East Bridgewater sewer expansion. So Dawn?
Yeah, so just real quick. So the regional water studies, all 17 communities in the district, we filed the grant for 470. It's a $940,000 project. It's a 470 match. The match came from the state ED bill. It also came from the South Shore Chamber, gave us some money, as well as the Plymouth County District Water Commission gave us some money as well. So it's a $940,000 project, 470 from EDA, 470 match. That was filed a week ago or so. We should have word on that sometime by mid-February or before. We're also working on a preliminary project in East Bridgewater relative to a sewer infrastructure project that's construction only. East Bridgewater received a $4 million Mass Works grant. We're piggybacking an EDA grant on there for $3 million, and the town's going to pick up a local match of $2 million plus. That's about a $9.6 million project. And I hope to have an application into EDA on that one sometime in March or beforehand. And I think that'll be a pretty quick turnaround. We'll probably get some sort of word on that in April or so. But those are the two projects that we have moving forward. At this point, we have several others that are in the hopper, but there's not enough information to talk about where those are at the moment. So, you know, we'll try to keep you folks involved and keep you apprised of what we're doing as we move forward. But those are three projects, EDA, two are preliminary. So that's all I have on that.
Excellent. That's a lot of work in a short amount of time, Don. So we moved along pretty quickly, and we've left plenty of time for an update from Stephen Cole from the Plymouth Foundation regarding the Entrepreneur Center and the work that he's done on that. So Stephen, if you want to kind of set the stage for that, and introduce yourself, if you will, and your background.
Sure, but in order to set the stage, I think everyone needs a glass of wine. Red or white, your choice. But I'll wait. If you want to dismiss yourself from the camera, I'll wait. So I like to tell folks I'm really just some guy, and it's true. I'm just some guy, but I have a really cool job, probably one of the best in Plymouth. I get to run the Economic Development Foundation. Some of you know us over the last few years about how we work with the Chamber of Commerce, not just to create things like COVID Ready, a little bit of a marketing opportunity for our small businesses to promote that they are taking seriously the COVID protocols and as a statement of public safety, you know, they take seriously their well-being. We also were successful in launching the Children's Business Fair last year. In fact, last year, this past October was our second year. Our first, we saw about 2,500 people walk through. Our second, we saw closer to 3,500. And we had to change the location because Memorial Hall wasn't large enough. And just as an econometric, we're working more closely with the school department to capture the value of what happens during the Children's Business Fair. So this is an organic business that these children in 5th grade across the school system, they start on their own. We have a curriculum attached to it, but at the end of the night, Amy Naples and I, we do a spot polling, and what we learned out of the 300 or so kids that participated this past year, on average, they made north of $200. Many more made closer to 300, but we're taking a conservative estimate. So at that rate, that means $50,000 changed hands at Plymouth South High School on October 21st this past year for the 5th grade Children's Business Fair. The idea here is to get students thinking about small business ownership as an option for themselves. Frankly, growing up, it was either clergy, military, or college. No one even talked to me about owning a business. So we're getting them young, just like the tobacco industry and the Catholics. What I think, though, that we're probably best known for more recently is the Blue Future Conference. We had one this past October. The idea of that came out of the EDA grant that we received. So we received $200,000 from the US EDA to study entrepreneurship in Plymouth, specifically Plymouth, but we teased it out to Bristol County and Barnstable County also. And there were basically 4 questions, you know, do we have entrepreneurs in Plymouth? I mean, the short answer is, of course, yes. We wanted to know what they're working on, what resources they're using, and what resources they need in order to scale up. And I'm not going to bury the lead, folks, and I want to be respectful of the agenda. Dottie knows I can go on for a minute or two when I'm revved up, but I just want to be very succinct here and incisive. One of the most endearing recommendations that came out of that study was that Plymouth is very well positioned to join Providence, Portsmouth, and Portland as the 4th P. And what that means is the foodie destinations in New England. So Portsmouth, Portland, and Providence are very well known. Plymouth is very well positioned to become that 4th P and market ourselves that way. We have a very small footprint of restaurants in the downtown, but what we're seeing, some of you who don't know, is as some vacancies have popped up in the retail space, restaurants already established in the downtown are gobbling up those locations. So for one example, the Tasty, very well established footprint in the downtown, they just opened up a new restaurant across the street from themselves called Honey Baby. We have the Wharf in downtown at the waterfront. They're opening up at the former T-Bones location up on Court Street. There's myriad examples of this. We already know about Malabar in the south of downtown, and then we have Three-Eyed Crab or Blue-Eyed Crab on Water Street. So frankly, I mean, in order to support the existing restaurant business, what we think we need here is a shared kitchen. And evolving how we talk about shared kitchen space is also a food science center. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But the fact of the matter is we're doing some things to not only support our aquaculture industry, but also that would support our restaurant industry as well. Having an offsite location so they can do offsite prep and cold storage. Also, food trucks is another way that we could help establish a new industry that doesn't really exist here. Food trucks, of course, don't really cannibalize the restaurant brick and mortar industry. The idea here is that with a robust food truck industry in our area, not just Plymouth, but in the region, we create more types of economic opportunities for people to own their own business, to own assets, and also to be employers. Food trucks also are a way that we could help create a shoulder season or get through the shoulder season. And it's a way that we can help achieve our long-term standing goal that existed way before COVID of creating that 18-hour downtown. So imagine it, you come in Plymouth on a Monday, a lot of restaurants aren't even open. Those that are only open at 4 o'clock and later. You need something to keep people here just a little bit longer until those restaurants open. And look, I mean, knowing myself, I mean, I get sober pretty quick walking around. So if I have a place where I can get a quick bite to eat until the next location where I can get a martini, it's going to keep me here longer. And so it helps create that dwell time. But one of the more important things, frankly, that came out of it was not just the existing aquaculture. It's how do we leverage our existing tourism sectors with our growth potential opportunities with blue-green economy. And so it's not just the aquaculture we're focusing on. We're focusing on quantum, AI, robotics, and biomedical. All of those things, all within the R&D spheres, right? So we have Bridgewater State that we're fostering great working relationships with. In fact, we have what will be our very first quantum startup company researching sensors based here in Plymouth. Many of you already know about our ambassador for AI, the MAS, the Mayflower Autonomous Ship. We're building on that. We actually have an AI company that launched out of that's doing research and development. We've made contacts also with the U.S. Navy Department that is using that type of equipment for all kinds of cool practical applications beyond just warfare, also climate change and coastal resiliency. Robotics, many of you already know if you've attended the Blue Future Conference, we have 3 companies here, Green Sea, Armach, and Bayonets. All 3 companies are focused on learning more about the ocean's deep. In fact, the owner says we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the ocean's deep, and that's a problem he wants to solve. He's based here in Plymouth. They found us because you can't launch submarines in Brattleboro, Vermont. And so I'm glad to say that our coastline is actually proving itself to be one of our greatest assets moving forward with the blue-green economy. So our focus is going to be, as I said, on the blue-green economy. I'm going to hold up a picture of our new logo to show you how serious we are about it. Everyone in economic development, of course, knows the shovel for shovel ready, the green and the blue for the green-blue economy. So what we're saying is that Plymouth is shovel ready for the green-blue economy, and we're giving real meaning to what those colors mean. And for us, it's quantum, AI, robotics, and biomedical. So I think I've shared a lot, Dottie. I think we're still a little ahead of schedule, so I'll pause in case anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, or wants me to go a little deeper into anything I've said.
Who's got a question? Well, Stephen, one of the things that I never realized before is that Plymouth has the longest coastline on the east, in the Northeast, which really opens up to a lot of opportunities. And I learned that at the Blue Futures Conference, which was really incredible. And the speakers that you had were just amazing. Some I figured I might not be too interested in this particular subject, and I was wrong. Every speaker that got up was just incredible, and I really learned so much. I can't wait till the next one, and I would really encourage people to attend.
Thank you for that.
So
Dottie.
what
Actually, to the point about our coastline, I'm actually joining a call immediately following this one with our colleagues at UMass Dartmouth. We're looking at putting together a Seaport Economic Council application to study all 37 miles of Plymouth's coastline so we can master plan it. We all know that Holtec is decommissioning. Maybe that's a really good place for some kind of research and development launch point for water-based crafts. We already have kelp growing in our area in Duxbury. We had a great presentation from John Lovett during the Blue Future Conference about that. There's obviously new opportunities where we can grow more kelp. And I'm not saying that we're going to be pulling in this much money, but if you grow it, then you have access to a $14 billion global industry, domestic. I mean, there's this huge growth potential. I started talking also about the shared science, the shared kitchens as the Food Science Center, also because, frankly, there's already huge investments from NASA and other food entities that are interested in food science research and development, especially for high protein yields, which is what kelp is. So some of the infrastructure that we're talking about is intended to support those types of industries, but also position us so that if we wanted to, if we were really interested in achieving it, I mean, ocean spray is part of a $350 billion global industry, and that's a fairly useless berry unless you put enormous amounts of energy into it to freeze it or boil it, right? Kelp is one of those things that I think is probably even more attractive as a potential co-op. You just got to get to the volumes. So I really like to see some kind of a corporate development from this, also just using raw resources. And then, of course, every layer of production you add to a raw product, you add value. I mean, just think about an oyster. I mean, it wholesales for about 53 cents. Then you go to a restaurant and they charge you about $3.50 for one. And that's all they did was shuck it and put some cocktail sauce on it. Sometimes if you go and get some oyster stuffing, you'll see that as a side for $5 to $7. And so that's a good point, a good way to demonstrate that every layer of production you add value. You also create jobs. And so guess what I'm getting at is we're focusing on how we can use our coastline and also create infrastructure to support the things that we're pulling out of the water. And this is also including tourism and recreation. I mean, if you go snorkeling and scuba diving in the bay right now, it's fairly desolate. There's not a lot happening in there. But if you have a kelp forest or something of the kin, or eelgrass, you create new ecosystems, and suddenly it supports also tourism as well as carbon recapture, coastal resiliency, and a food source.
So Stephen, I know what Rob May's thinking right now. Yeah, but so what about Brockton? For the other communities that are on here and the other municipalities and agencies, how does that translate to growth in the region? And, Laura, if you want to chime in, because you were a panelist that had really good information about the workforce and the secondary workforce for some of these happenings. And to me, I think that really resonated with me, being from Easton. This is great. It's Plymouth. If I want to go to Plymouth, it's awesome. But also the outreach will be out to the whole region for jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities.
You want me to, are we deferring to Laura for that? Is that okay?
Sure.
All right.
Thanks, Tony. Those are
Hi,
great
Laura.
questions. Hi, Stephen. How are you? And
Great, how are you?
everybody. We have a lot of data started to support the facts and metrics that Stephen had just mentioned. We're uniquely positioned right now to move forward in a few different directions simultaneously, which is exciting. We don't usually have these opportunities before us. But we are supported by a larger infrastructure of movement across all of New England right now. Stephen had mentioned the blue-green economy. Our colleagues that are doing this work on the North Shore or on the South Coast, everybody has a niche. They have the same but different challenges and opportunities. Has that been discussed in these meetings yet? What other regions are doing with green blue? Okay.
No.
One thing that
I am in touch with Katie Akeson from the Cape Cod Chamber. She's their new economic development director. So we're working closely on them also hosting some kind of a blue conference sometime in spring.
That's great. And Stephen, you in your group, I applaud you for getting the Blue Economy Conference off the ground in Plymouth. That was a long time coming. I know Barnstable County's been ahead of us on that. Same with the North Shore. So the conversation is similar but different in every region. For example, in Plymouth, we are talking about a lot of very small entities, startups, nanotech. Conversation in the South Coast is larger. They talk about wind and the wind pipeline supply chain issues. That is just not the conversation we're having just yet. But there's a role for everybody, Dottie, like you said. So even the inland communities will have an opportunity to play a part in that. One of the best things that we have here on the South Shore is our talent, and it's really unrivaled. So we have, by definition, we have the highest level of educational attainment amongst our population. And that's reflected, as you know, in our cost of living. So the communities of the South Shore typically have a higher cost of living compared to other parts of the Commonwealth. Our average median home prices are higher on average, and people's incomes, typically a combination of family incomes, will be higher. And we have to think about that from every angle. Is that good? Is that bad? Are we still maintaining a tapestry of community? So as it relates to the blue-green economy, we're thinking about how we can expand that. We did analysis on wages for blue-green, and there's a lot of potential, unmet potential right now. So we're glad to support that here at the Workforce Board in any way that we can. But I did see your message, Mary, and you're right. Valerie, I know you have a whole different level of expertise in this for this particular microregion. So I will digress, but I will say that I wouldn't be here today without the blue-green economy. In 1907, my dad's grandparents left Bologna to work at the Cordage Company, the largest rope manufacturer in the world. Obviously, we haven't traveled far. I still live in Plymouth, but we have a unique opportunity there to maximize not only on the history, but the opportunity for innovation.
Thanks, Laura. We do have a couple of questions. Pam, you had your hand raised?
Yes, Stephen, I was wondering what your relationship is with Mass Bio. Do you have a bio-ready designation? Do you have any sites pre-permitted? Like, where are you with attracting the companies right now?
No, that's great. Great question. So actually, I'm working with the Board of Health right now to adopt the NIH guidelines to make us a platinum community. We are at gold, and I'm working with Lee Hartman to identify the 20,000 or so plus or minus square feet that's needed pre-permitted. We're moving right along. The NIH guidelines are being reviewed right now by the Board of Health. They're going to take up the vote with their own additional regulations at the next meeting, but they did open up the last meeting with those. And there's no surprise, I'm sure everyone knows about the so-called woodlots. Boston South is working very closely with Mass Bio also to attract something to that location.
Stephen, what level did you say you were going for?
Presently, we're gold, but we're pursuing platinum designation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Excellent. Deborah, you have a question.
Yes, thank you so much, Dottie, and through you to Stephen. Have you gotten I like what you're doing, I like your presentation, but have you gotten the buy-in from the EPA advocates, clean water, clean air groups? Because it seems that when we have our missions, on the surface, it sounds and it seems to be going in the right direction. But when those advocates step in, they have other concerns. And I just wanted to know if they had been considered to weigh in. That's the first question. Then I have a second question.
Sure. And the short answer is absolutely. Not only were they part of the studies that UMass did, but also we're continuing to engage them. In fact, Dave Gould, who is the director of the town's Marine and Environmental Affairs Department, he is intimately involved in our Blue Future conference planning, as well as our Blue Economy strategy. And bottom line, Deborah, is vertical lines are very difficult. In fact, it's also impacting the lobstermen, which are a very well-established industry in this area. Bottom line, though, is if it swims like this, you can't screw with it, right? So I'm not interested in doing anything that's going to disrupt the whales. And so those are some of the more sensitive areas around town. And that's why we're doing a 37-mile coastal study, so we can identify places that are most appropriate for growing kelp, most appropriate for shellfish, and some areas that are suitable for R&D and recreation. Now, I'll pause here to say too, I talk an awful lot about kelp as though it's a slam dunk industry, and frankly, it's not. There are regulatory things in place that right now do inhibit its growth, but because of what we saw in Duxbury, we know that it's possible. So leaning into the positive, there are some regulatory areas that are mostly policy. There are some that are legislative. Matt Moratori is one of my board members. So any place where there's a legislative nuance that needs to be identified, corrected to allow this type of industry to grow, we're going to work with Matt and Lenatra and Moran on those things. And to do it responsibly too. It's not to do it for the sake of doing it. It's to do it to make sure that the laws catch up with what we see now is a high growth potential industry. In some cases too, the state asserts authority over certain areas, regulatory areas in the waterways, and it's mostly because cities and towns just simply haven't asserted that type of authority themselves. And so we're hoping that working with the lobstermen, identifying these unique economic opportunities, some of these industries are in jeopardy, like lobstermen. So we want to give them a pivot point. And I think that this could be one of those things that solves a lot of the state's crises. And I'll pause here to say, Deborah, I'm sure you're glad you asked this question, but the state says that we have a water crisis, we have a food crisis, we have an energy crisis, we have a housing crisis, we have a jobs crisis, right? And I'm sure there's at least one other. Well, at least when you look at things like kelp, it solves the food crisis. It solves a water crisis in some ways too, because you're not pouring potable water on this. It's growing right in its natural environment. So frankly, the biggest issue that we're seeing from environmental groups is that if we're looking toward our waterways as our economic development strategy, the biggest concern seems to be with what happens at Holtec and what they're going to do with their 1 million gallons of water. Dumping that in the bay would certainly cause an interesting PR concern for anything that grows in our water, right? Did you have a second question?
And the second question is, I'm from the town of Stoughton. We're not on the coastal way, but we do have ponds, and we do have wetlands. So how could we use your idea to help Stoughton, but we have to consider our environment and what we have available to us. But how can we take that idea and spread it out to inland areas like Stoughton?
Sure. I would look first, I'm sure Stoughton has an MVP, some kind of a municipal vulnerability study or preparedness study. I would say look at that first, because one of the most endearing things about entrepreneurship that I find anyhow is that it solves problems. And the MVP is intended to actually identify some of those soft spots. Where are those problems? Businesses or nonprofits can exist to help answer those problems. I would say, having worked previously in Carver, we're not a coastal community in Carver, but we have certainly a lot of ponds. And one of the things we were concerned about was, of course, drought. So while I was there, we were looking at ways that we can save the farm, so to speak. So we allowed for, we wrote the zoning bylaws for dual use that allowed solar arrays to sit on top of active bogs. That brought in revenue, not just to the farmers, but also to the community. And it saved the farm, and which is an even more important thing, because let's face it, if a farmer has to sell the upland acres, it's going to be developed into housing, and very few communities can absorb that type of development, especially without the type of infrastructure we need for the type of density that we know is more responsible. So I say that because saving the farms actually in a lot of ways saves the community from being overdeveloped. And as a footnote, if 80 Makepeace really wanted to, all of the land that they own in Carver, they could develop 500 homes by right tomorrow if they wanted to. So, I mean, imagine what that does to a town of 11,000 people. I'll pause there to say also, Deborah, one of the things that we looked at was for research and development purposes to mitigate drought impacts, having floating solar arrays. So there's less evaporation, creates a unique product opportunity, and it's a potential business that can be shopped around to other types of communities that are looking for solutions to energy security, as well as energy storage and drought mitigation. So I don't know enough about Stoughton itself, but if you want to have an offline talk, we can talk about some of the things that you see in some of their reports and studies, and come up with some ideas. And I'd like to say too, Dottie, if I have the floor for another moment or two, I cut my teeth in urban environments. In fact, I like to say that just for the group's interests, I worked in Springfield during the control board years, and shortly after for 7 years, and then 5 years in Hartford. And then 3 years north of the city in Salem and Saugus. So I say this because I have an absolute adoration for cities. I find myself in Plymouth, and that's another matter altogether. But when it comes to urban problems and how they affect the surrounding areas, I'm not blind or ignorant to Brockton as it is a gem to us. In fact, it's probably the place, cities are the place where we see the biggest concentration of labor pools. One of the things we see often in Plymouth is people complaining that we can't get enough people into Plymouth to fill all of the jobs that we have. And as a footnote, we have about 22,000 people who leave Plymouth every day to go to work, and about 16,000 people who drive into Plymouth every day to come to work, and about 8,000 people drive from one end of town to the other. So we have about as many jobs in town as there are people who leave town. The problem, though, is that the 16 or so thousand people who drive in, 60% of them are making under $40,000 a year. And that's what you expect in our tourism industries, right? The one specific industry for tourism, it's restaurant, retail, and accommodations. Those three sectors make up our tourism industry here in town, and 60% of them are making under $40,000 a year. So part of our task here is to create higher paying jobs. And we expect that focusing on these areas are ways that we can see higher paying jobs. In terms of our urban cores and the soft spot I feel for them, we're the regional economic development foundation. We base ourselves here in Plymouth. I like to say that Plymouth is the only city in the Commonwealth that is post-nuclear. Every other city is post-industrial. The only industrial footprint we really have is Cordage. And so the post-nuclear moniker that I've been carrying here, what's the pivot point? Well, that's where the quantum and the AI and all that stuff that comes in, because you need to have a fundamental basic understanding of atomic behavior in order to get to some of those types of products. So what's the pivot point for nuclear? It's AI, quantum, et cetera. But to our Brockton friends, specifically addressing that, Amy Naples and I work very closely together. We are two separate agencies, but we serve on each other's boards because obviously what we do is complementary. We were very successful in securing some funding, not only to support women in the workforce. We got $85,000 thanks to the help of Senator Moran to support women who are enrolled in a licensed program, certification, job training, or if you're starting a business. We will pay for daycare services. Our goal is to get 10 to 14 women from the region active in that. So there's an example of where someone from Brockton can certainly benefit from this. Also, immigrant entrepreneurs, one of my favorite groups to work with. Just putting yourself in a new environment without a formal understanding of the culture, the language, or processes. I mean, it just demonstrates that you're innately disruptive. And so investing in that is something that I really want to do also. In fact, Plymouth has about, I mean, not Plymouth, but Massachusetts has about 25% of the nation's foreign-born Portuguese-speaking population. That is a significant number, and I think just if anyone goes to Yarmouth, New Bedford, Fall River, Plymouth is in the middle of these high growth potential areas. And frankly, there isn't enough industry in either of those places that can support the type of growth that we're seeing. So you want people to think about opening businesses here in Plymouth, and we're closing that language gap. John Cox is a very good friend of the foundation. We met with some of his team last week. We're going to continue to meet with him this month. I expect in the next few weeks, maybe a month, we'll announce a new a free language service program so that people who are struggling with learning English in a business environment can acquire those skills. That solves a couple of problems. It's an opportunity for restaurants to bring people from the back of the house to the front of the house so you can make more money. It also helps people understand things like, it's one thing to be able to say the color red. It's another thing to understand what it means when you're in the red. And so solving some of those low-hanging fruit business parlance is also part of our objective. And that, of course, benefits some of our urban cores also. So please know I'm very interested in working with our urban friends, even though some of the things I talked about with blue-green economy is largely focused on the asset-based community and economic development. But we're going to have to rely on the region to fill some of these jobs and to frankly execute these ideas. These are ideas that I need someone at the end of this to take and run with and start these businesses. Otherwise, they're just me talking in platitudes toward UMass for doing the research. Are my urban friends satisfied with that answer? We're okay? Okay.
John Fay, raise your hand.
Hey, John.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Stephen. That's really a tremendous amount of information. We didn't even start to talk about the potential need for a conference center down there. So we're going to have to table that for another meeting as well. But lots of great stuff going on in Plymouth. When you got that first grant from the Economic Development Administration, Old Colony Planning Council is the Economic Development District representative here, and we work with a federal representative on any kind of a grant that comes through our region. So I'm sure for next steps, you'll be talking with Don about getting a bigger grant to further this along, especially in the nuclear community.
Post-nuclear community.
Post-nuclear community.
But actually, and to the group, thank you, Dottie, for reminding me. I never ever forget that we would not have received that grant money if it wasn't for Old Colony. You folks submitted that grant for us. We wrote the narrative, but if it wasn't for you putting that grant in its final product and submitting it through the portal, we would not have received it. So thank you so much for all your support also.
Thanks, Stephen. All right, any other questions for Stephen before we move on? All right, next we have member updates. So if anybody would just want to raise their hand to give us any updates, and if you give us an update, like Stephen, you just mentioned the babysitting program and English learner language programs. if you could send me information on those, I'll compile everything and send it back to everybody in a follow-up email from this. So who has an update that they want to share about something great going on? Joe?
Thanks, Dottie. So I just wanted to remind folks that BAT is in the process of planning to transition its fleet from diesel buses to battery electric buses. We've actually submitted an order for 5 electric buses that we will be receiving towards the end of this year. And we're in talks with National Grid, and we've got electrical engineers working on the supporting infrastructure for the bus charging equipment that we're going to have to get in order to make those buses run. And so that's a big project for us this year.
That's great. Also want to congratulate you on having free fares for the month of November and December for help people get around during the holidays.
And we saw an increase in usage there, and it was really nice to have, you know, buses more full than they've been in a long time.
Well, our executive director, Mary Waldron, had this great idea that we would go out and split up our staff and take different BAT routes through the city to get the full user experience. And we had such a fun time. It was really great. We may have been one of the rowdiest groups on the bus, but people appreciated our enthusiasm. And we all commented when everyone came back. We talked about what we saw, and the buses are clean. The drivers are wonderful. It was safe, efficient. You know, the bus drivers were getting to all of the places they were supposed to on time. So that's so important if you're trying to get to a doctor's appointment at the Veterans Hospital, or if you're trying to get to your job, trying to get your kids to school or to daycare. It was really impressive. So congratulations to BAT.
Thank you.
Mary, did you want to add anything to that?
No, other than Dottie did a great job of doing some FaceTime Live while we were doing that. And, you know, again, just the access to jobs, access to education is critical for this region. And, you know, Stephen, you and I, we've had some challenge, you know, talks about how do we get from the Brockton area to Plymouth easily, and it's not. And know that the South Shore Chamber and some other folks have been having some discussions about how do we make that much more palatable and easy besides just doing Uber or Lyft. But I think that's a next conversation I think that we need to take up about Mary Ellen from Gatra. And I know that Brockton area transit. So how do we embrace that, and how do we then have a voice to say that it's a necessity in order for not only those within the inner city, but also those from rural areas to get to jobs that become available. So this is all a great discussion today. So thank you, Dottie, for that opportunity.
Thanks, Mary. Anyone else have an update from their part of the region? Tricia, I think you have something going on, right? Coming up.
So for people that don't know me, my name is Tricia White. I'm the Small Business Development Officer for NeighborWorks Housing Solutions. And one of the things that we do that could actually help you, Stephen, is we run called Building a Better Business for All. And we opened it in Brockton in the beginning last year. We now offer it. It's an online program. It's 3 parts. It goes over the legal aspects of running a business, the marketing aspects of running a business, and the financial aspects of running a business, all the way down to a cash flow sheet. I created a 17-page booklet that they use that goes through the entire program, with the end coming out being more aware of what the responsibilities are of being in business, but also having a working business plan. All of my dates are online. They're at NeighborWorks Housing Solutions, so nhsmass.org. You can find them. Normally I do them on Tuesdays or Thursdays, and it's 2 hours in the evening, 6 to 8. It's interactive. Then usually the 4th Monday of every month, I'm in the process of getting the last of those up, but I do teach a marketing class. So if people want to hop on, I do it at 9 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the evening. Lastly, I am a TA for the Mass Growth Capital Empowered Digital grant. So if you know of any, small business owners that have been in business for a year, you know, the kind of making under 2.5 million, it's a primary source of income. There are a few other things that go with it. They can sit down with me and we can help them go after $5,000 for digital work. So you can actually do accounting software, POS software, cyber software, digital marketing strategies, website design. And I work with them I actually sit with them and apply do the whole grant with them. And then I will also give them oversight on what their needs are, as that is a lot of my background. So I have that. And I know for Easton, I know as of Wednesday night, Easton Chamber is actually doing an evening. I'm going to speak to them on what is required for the Empowerment Digital Grant. So if you know of anybody that wants to see a presentation, go over to the Easton Chamber. It's going to be at 5:30 tomorrow night. And I always do the presentation, not only with the grant, but if you don't qualify for the grant, you're going to learn a little bit about a Google business profile.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Tricia.
Dottie.
Mary.
Dottie, just on the heels of what Tricia was talking about, I just want to give her and the Chamber and Carrie, the Chamber applied for some funding to assist small businesses with website update. And since OCPC owns this building, we so happen to be an interim president of the Downtown Brockton Association, and our website was so old. But that critical piece, if you know businesses and you know some folks who could utilize some services, you know, definitely talk to Trish, but look to the local chamber for potential funding. The websites and having that ability to do your business online is critical. It doesn't take away from being in person, but I just wanted to give shout out to Trish and to Carrie, who from the I'm sorry, the website, the name, I'm sorry.
It's Carrie is KMA Web Design.
Thank
So
you.
I work part-time for NeighborWorks Housing Solutions, and in my other life, I actually work with chambers on grants that they get to help small businesses. So I've been on them with the Ponset River Chamber. We've done 2 grants with them, and we just finished a grant with Metro South Chamber with Chris Cooney, and it was delightful to work with. We get to work with Mary and also the Cape Verdean Association, you know, to try and get them better visibility on the web, because they do great things, and nonprofits especially don't qualify for like the Empower grant, but they do, you know, we can get them into different grants, especially through chambers. But it's amazing with, you know, I've always had a background in working with small businesses, but to see the number of businesses that are out there that don't have websites and the number of businesses that aren't making it because they don't have the foundations, you know, what we want to make sure is that to go into business, to stay in business. And if there are grants out there to help them up their game, we want to make sure that they can get them.
Great. Thanks, Tricia.
Thank you, Mary.
Deborah.
Yes, thanks, Dottie. Through you to Tricia or Mary, are there any restrictions on the type of businesses they are? Like the cannabis business, it's state approved, but not federally approved. So would you help small businesses that are in that area of the industry? So
I'll talk to that really briefly, only because the empowerment grant, you cannot. So what's happened is, because it's state, it's recognized at a state level. A lot of these grants, when they are coming through, have a federal portion to them. And with the federal portion coming with them, we can't touch anything in the cannabis industry, at least with the empowerment grant. I'm not sure how it reads with the chamber grants. But I think if we're allowing people to go into those industries, I'm not sure why we can't help them. You know, even if we can't get the grants for them, if there's somebody that needs a little bit of marketing help, they can give me a call and I can always meet with them and give them a few tips.
Thank you. Great question, Deborah. Pam.
I just wanted to mention that Trish was nice enough to come out to Stoughton in August. I set up a meeting with her and about a dozen business owners so she could talk to them about the digital empowerment grant. And you also gave a lot of other information to help people market their businesses. And I'm still sending people to you to this day. I'm referring people to you. So I just wanted to thank you for your help with that. And if people can attend that meeting that you're having in Easton, that would be great because you're a great resource. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. I appreciate it too, because when economic development directors bring me out to at least speak to their groups, it gives me connections and abilities to help more people.
Excellent. Well, if there's no other comments or questions or updates, if you did give me an update, if you would be nice enough to just send me a quick email with any kind of information or flyers or collaterals on that, I can include it in the follow-up. The next item we have is other business. And one of the things that we wanted to talk with is OCPC has applied for an EPA community-wide assessment grant for brownfields. Dawn, did you want to talk about that, or do you?
Real brief, just brief. It's a community-wide assessment grant for $500,000. There's several sites. I think there's 6 sites, and they spread from Easton, East Bridgewater, Hanson, and Whitman. So hopefully we're going to be able to look at these sites. There's a matrix of services we're going to provide, and we're going to look at each site. Hopefully we're going to be able to get these sites in a position to build a foundation to get them into a position where we can do cleanup and then redevelopment. So we're not going to get word on that grant till sometime in the spring of 2023. And hopefully that'll get us into a much better position relative to looking at these brownfield sites. They're all linked by the commuter rail line and the stations in each one of those communities. So more on that as we move forward in the spring.
Thanks, Dawn.
Yeah.
The other thing that we had on here is MBTA communities. If you work with a municipality that has any kind of transportation, 16 of our 17 communities, then you know that there's a deadline coming up for your action plan for January 31st. So just reach out to us if you have any questions on that. And the other thing that I have on here is meeting in person versus webinar. I'm not sure how comfortable folks are or the abilities to get out and meet in person for our next meeting in April. So I will send out an email in advance. I know that a lot of it is going to be dependent on the COVID and flu and RSV numbers and where everything stands, but we'd really like to think about getting together and potentially have hybrid, but it would be nice. Since I've been at OCPC, we haven't done this in person. I started in July of 2020 during the beginning of COVID. So just be thinking about that. The next meeting is April 18th.
Yeah, just one other note. So, I mean, over in Serpent, I did this for like 30 years relative to running this committee over there. It was a regional economic strategy committee. And what we did is often we farmed out to different locales where other people hosted it in different areas so that we could get, more people coming in, more activity and whatnot. So that's also an option to, the in-person meetings, not just having it at one location all the time, but kind of spread it around. So something to think about.
Excellent. All right, is there any public comment? I don't see any. Our next meeting is April 18th at noon. And if nobody has any questions, I just want to say thank you to everybody. It feels like we haven't met in such a long time. So it was great to see everybody. We've got some new members to welcome. Bob, welcome to Bridgewater. We look forward to connecting with you to see what we can do to help you over there. And with that, I would take a motion to adjourn. Everyone wants to say.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay.
Who made the motion?
Dawn.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Who
Nice meeting you,
seconded?
folks.
Trish? All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks.
Have a nice week.
Bye.
Have
Happy
a
New Year.
productive week.
Bye.
Happy New Year.
See ya.
Bye.